Way of Water's plot is functional enough, but highly uninspired. It's only different from the plot of Avatar 1 on a mostly shallow, aesthetic level. The reasons we move through the plot may be different from the original, but in practice, it's the same story, just easier and less logical. Firstly, the plot of the sequel is more or less a beat-for-beat retreading of the original. Jake's circumstances basically force him to go to a strange, brand new world. He's introduced to a new alien group of Na'vi. He needs to learn their ways to be accepted by the group. He starts to learn their ways, including how to ride their animals, but struggles at first because he's a fish out of water. He's eventually accepted by the group. The group gets mad at Jake for the harm the Sky People have brought him, and Quaritch, a military leader of the Sky People, oversees the destruction of something sacred to the group of Na'vi for the sake of obtaining a precious substance. Quaritch goes after something important to Jake and Na'vi. Jake has to stop him by leading a battalion of Na'vi in a charge against Quaritch's aircraft. And the battle involves Sky People, robotic mechs, and vehicles fighting the animal-riding Na'vi. Jake's side overtakes the battlefield and saves the important thing Quaritch was threatening. It eventually comes down to Quaritch versus Jake. Jake's side wins. He returns to his new home where he's been accepted as a respectable figure as truly one of them. All those plot points apply to both movies. And in the sequel, meanwhile, while all that stuff is happening with the main character, the bad guys are doing the exact same stuff as the first movie. Quaritch is learning to fly a Taruk at the same time as Sully is learning to ride a Wataruk. And in the end, it's almost like all they could think of for a climax, since the original was so great and powerful, was the same bit, but in a different setting. Secondly, like we touched on earlier, the whole fish out of water plotline puts Jake in a similar situation as the first movie, except it's actually easier because they're welcomed due to the identity Jake earned in the first movie. They don't have to prove that they deserve a place in Waterworld. Their identities don't come with any baggage. There's no tension building under there. So in Waterworld, there's nothing else going on except just this enjoyment of the new scenery. Their identities help them along instead of acting as obstacles that they have to overcome. Jake still has to learn to ride a beast as a part of being welcomed, except he does a lot better learning to ride the beast than he did in the first movie. It's that same movie, just easier. Even things that should matter, in practice, don't. When Jake's kid gets back from whale watching, and he's out past his bedtime, the chief immediately has his son apologize to Jake's son. It's not like there's a misunderstanding that pushes characters apart. The tribe already understands and treats them as equals, thanks to Jake's status. The fight with the bullies doesn't actually warrant being afraid for any character. Kiri just laughs at it the whole time, and it doesn't cause any problems that need to be solved for us to prove that we deserve to stay on the island. Even when the islanders get mad at Jake, it's really easy for him to talk down the crowd. And even what he says in that conversation to talk them down ultimately doesn't matter at all. Jake saying he'll disarm the harpoons is just confetti because he never actually needs to go out and disarm one. It's just an easy way to get out of the situation. In the final battle, the way the kids are used instead of the sacred tree as the thing that we're fighting for is easier in that there's no overarching time limit for the final fight. We're also fighting on Na'vi's turf. They have the advantage. And when the bad guy takes the kids hostage, we don't have to think our way out because a whale just shows up to bail us out. Nature's not out to get us at every turn in this foreign environment like it was in the first movie. With the exception of one scene, every creature on the whole planet is on our side. And we feel that lack of obstacles when we feel like we're watching a nature documentary for a good part of the second act. It's pretty, but it's only pretty. We're retreading a story we already know, except this time the story has had most of the challenge that makes us worry and care about our heroes removed. Thirdly, in order to get us through the same story beats as in the original, the plot will often force characters to move towards those beats, even if doing so doesn't make much sense. In order to get us to fly away to Waterworld, aka the next plot point, the story just sort of has no one care that Spider was kidnapped in like the previous scene. Neytiri wants to fight and Jake wants to keep his family safe, but even though Spider has been established as being accepted as basically one of them, no one even mentions going after him. No one mentions that they miss him. No one says anything at all, which is kind of weird. And in order to get to the villain plot points, the plot also just has the villains keep chasing the heroes into the second act even though they don't really need to. Once Jake leaves and proclaims a new leader, the Sky People have no real reason to go after him anymore. He's not the resistance leader anymore. If killing Jake were symbolic or precautionary and it would fix an established issue the humans were facing, that'd be one thing, but they don't even reference a real reason for continuing to pursue him. If it's for Quaritch's revenge, That also doesn't work for reasons we went over earlier. The antagonistic force in your movie can't have reasoning that isn't made explicitly clear. That's weak sauce that makes things feel pointless. And as far as the ending beat goes, since they wanted to end on the same sort of assimilation note as the first movie, they did that. They copied that plot point too and pasted it into this movie. But that plot point doesn't logically fit into this movie. It's not like defeating Quaritch phantom menaces the rest of his people. I get that the theme is run versus fight, so they don't want to abandon their new home, but in this setting, that's not a move that makes sense. The Sky People know exactly where they are and have already proven that they can subdue a village with just a small unit. The humans can just come back with an actual army of actual soldiers or just friggin' bomb the place. Now, writing the absolute bare bones of a completely new and actually good plot might seem like a lot of work, but since we already know what the fixed world building and the fixed villain and everything surrounding them should look like, a version of the story that sort of writes itself is as follows. The Sky People return to terraform Pandora for the reasons we went over earlier, and they need to take away the advantage Eywa gave the Na'vi at the end of the last movie. Quaritch returns and beats Jake, triggering some sort of PTSD, or at least shaking him up significantly enough to act as a trait we can play with. Jake is still leader of the Resistance, and the reason they go to Waterworld is because the Sky People are establishing some sort of base not far from there, in the water. Jake learns the ways of the people, and his family enjoys their doctrines of letting go, but Jake can't because he's preoccupied with Quaritch. He's also resented by the current chief, who feels like Jake's preoccupation is dangerous. Somewhere along the way, Jake finds out that the unobtainium that they're still mining from the Home Tree base is being shipped to that new facility, and he stages a plan to attack the Home Tree mine involving some water people because he needs to use their special abilities or whatever. During that operation, Jake gets distracted and gets too close to Quaritch to try and defeat him because he thinks it'll resolve his personal problems, but that just ends up backfiring, and Quaritch exposes Jake's new village and loses the opportunity to stop the humans. Jake resigns as leader in disgrace, and at the all is lost moment, it's actually the last person we'd expect, the new chief, who inspires Jake to fight again for the right reasons, keeping with the whole letting go and second chance doctrine. The information they got from the field operation is that the new water base is a flooding facility powered by unobtainium that's going to destroy the islands and the villages on the coastline in order to wipe out a whole population of Na'vi and make way for the humans to start moving inland. So the final battle starts, and it's the terraforming lady's new flooding technology versus the Na'vi, and the chief who inspired Jake sacrifices herself for Jake, again keeping with the whole second chance doctrine. She's had her chance and she's made use of it, and now she's giving Jake the opportunity. The battle is being won by Quaritch's lethal task force until Quaritch's vengeance takes over and he prioritizes Jake, abandoning the fight for the terraforming lady. Jake does the opposite of this and fights the terraforming lady. After the big battle is won, it is again down to Quaritch and Jake, and Quaritch is holding Jake's family hostage. Jake wins by fighting level-headed for the right reasons, completing his arc, and he recognizes that as long as the Sky People are there, his family will be in danger, and the new tribe makes him their leader so he can continue on. We can still have that cool ending shot where we zoom into his eyes. Now the reasons that we move from one plot point to another are always logical and are often simultaneously used to characterize. Now we have reasons to still fear for our hero that are directly tied to the theme. Now our fixed world building and fixed villain have a story that takes full advantage of them. Our world naturally connects to the previous movie and centers the plot in what's important in its own context. Our antagonistic force challenges the heroes to a higher degree than in the original, and it feels like it has a point. Our plot is something we haven't seen before that shakes up the dynamics between the characters without losing who those characters are. Our sequel is a proper sequel. New, next level, and natural. So glad you checked out the Way of Water video series. If you liked it, I just found out YouTube actually has a button for that right below the video, right next to the subscribe button, so don't worry if you get those confused, just hit both. And also, check out my new favorite design in the merch store. It's a Get Moving plot design. It's radical. Hey, as long as you're checking stuff out, take a quick look at the all-new Patreon page. There are a bunch of new benefits, including, possibly most importantly, I'm going to start dropping videos in sequential order as I create them immediately through Patreon. So if you don't want to wait for the next series to come out all at once on YouTube, hey, you don't have to anymore. I'll also be putting out some exclusive content on there. I'm thinking a first watch, just kind of initial take when I see a new movie that might be full of flaws, but will give you access to understand what I took away from the movie as a person, as well as some behind the scenes content about how I make these videos. Maybe that'll be helpful for some, maybe that'll be helpful for crying out loud. Maybe that'll be helpful. I give up!